So let's start a presentation. Hello everyone, welcome to this presentation, Mixing Methodologies. So my focus will be planning aspect of it. So you are planning, trying to think about how to design mixed method before you do the implementation. So the planning is very important because without doing a very good planning, it will adversely affect how you collect your data and analyze and also address the research question that you have. So my name is Philip Edu. I'm one of the methodology experts at NCAID, and I'm here with Dr. Glaze. He'll be helping me with questions. So if you have any question, you can type in your in a chat box your questions, and then we'll be happy to address them for you. And also, I always, when I'm doing presentation, I want to make it more interactive. So we're going to use a system called Poll Everywhere. So what will happen is that if you want to respond to some of the questions I'm going to ask, you can just go to the website, Polls Everywhere website that is here right now. Dr. Glazik would type in the link for you so that you can click on that. Or if you want to use the text, you can go to, you can text Philip Edu 154 to 37607 to join, the conversation. So if you want to use text message, you can text to 37607. You text Philip Edu 154 to 37607. Then you can join the conversation concerning responding to some of the questions I'm going to ask. So let's start with this question. So which of the following is true about qualitative and quantitative method? So we have 4 options. The first one is there are fundamental differences between qualitative and quantitative methods. The second option is each of them has strengths and weaknesses. And the third option is both can be used could be used in a single study to address a research problem, right? And the last one is all of the above. So you can respond to this question by going to the website here, the pollev.com/Philipedu154, or you can use the text. So these are text information if you can do that. So let me see whether anyone can respond to that. So I can see that in the chat box somebody said all of the above. Shelley. Yeah, so any response? Apart from Shelley, any kind of response to? You don't have to use polls everywhere. I think we are not a lot here, so you don't have to use the polls everywhere. You can even type in if you want to. Okay, so I think that since I have one response, I can go ahead and, talk about that. So let me just give you brief information about the 3 most important things that you have to know about qualitative and quantitative approaches. So there are fundamental differences between them, and and I'm going to talk about the differences very soon. And the next one is each of them, has strengths and weaknesses. Whether you're using qualitative approach or quantitative approach, we have, there are strengths and weaknesses that you as a researcher should be aware of it, so that you'll be able to use the approach very well. And third, the third thing that you have to note is that you can use both approaches in a single study to adequately address the research problem that you have or the research question that you have. So these are the 3 most important things that you have to note concerning qualitative and quantitative approaches. As you are aware, maybe you will be aware that there are fundamental differences between the 2 approaches. When it comes to qualitative study, it's more of exploratory study. You are exploring. So what you are doing, you are collecting data, you are making observation, you are talking to participants in order for you to generate theory or maybe develop themes to address your research question that you have. And for quantitative, it's more of a confirmatory study. You are collecting observation, you are doing surveys to test hypothesis, or you want to test a theory, right? So these are the fundamental differences between them. And when it comes to assumptions, whenever you are using a qualitative study, we use, as a qualitative researcher, you see yourself as an instrument. So this means that there's a connection between you and what you are observing or what you are studying, right? And there's a connection between you and also the participant. Because you are going to directly interact with participants, your background, your perceptions, your biases might influence the kind of information that you're going to collect from them or the kind of question that you're going to ask participants. So there's a higher subjectivity in doing a qualitative study. When it comes to quantitative, there's a separation between what you are studying and yourself. So this means that when you are studying a variable, you identify an instrument and use it to measure that variable, right? So this means that you are not personally influencing participant response. You are using an instrument to measure the variable. So there's more of objectivity here. And then you have to think about a qualitative study, you have to think about the context. In qualitative study, the context is everything. You have to think about a setting because the context influences human behavior, right? So if you are interviewing participants, you want to know their background, you want to know their biases, you want to know their beliefs, you want to know their setting, you want to know the situation they find themselves in, because it will help you, this information will help you to understand what you are studying, the information that they are giving to you. When it comes to quantitative study, it's context-free. So this means that you are going to collect information to generalize to the population that you are finding you selected from, right? You sample from the population and you collect information from participants and have analyze the data, have your findings, and then generalize your findings to the population that you sampled from. So it's more of deductive reasoning. So this means that you have your hypothesis based on maybe what you have studied or based on what you have learned concerning the topic. You develop your hypothesis and then you go back and collect data to test the hypothesis to whether the hypothesis is true or not. Qualitative is more of inductive reasoning, right? You go and collect information to develop theory or develop a model to explain the phenomenon or the research problem that you are studying. So as I said, there's a fundamental differences between them. And as a researcher, if you want to combine these two, you have to be aware of the differences. So, and also I've listed some of the approaches at the qualitative and the quantitative approach. I don't have time to go through everything, but the most important thing that you have to notice is that there are fundamental differences. And as a researcher, you have to be aware of all the assumptions associated with qualitative study and also associated with quantitative study so that you'll be able to use it well. So then what is mixed method research? It's all about collecting, analyzing, and interpreting qualitative and quantitative data in a single study, right? You are doing a study, you don't want to focus on only using one approach. You want to focus on using qualitative and quantitative approach. And then another aspect that you have to think about is mixing. You have to integrate both data or both approaches or both findings. So the two main things that you have to think about is to make your study a mixed method, there should be the fact that there should be two approaches happening, right? The qualitative approach and quantitative approach. You are using a two approach to study the phenomenon or the research problem that you have identified. then there should be an integration. There should be a mixing. There should be a way of mixing the two findings or two interpretations or maybe two data. So these two things should happen before we can call your study a mixed method study, right? And if you have any question, you can type it in, and I'll be happy to address them. So I can stop and respond to your question. But I want you to get a basic understanding of doing a mixed method study. What is the essence of doing a mixed method study, or what is the essence of mixed method research? There are five main essence. The first one is you will want to enrich your findings. You collect a qualitative data, right? And then in order to find out whether what the characteristics that we have collected from participants reflects the population that you sample from, then you can do a quantitative study, right? Or incorporate a quantitative data for you to best understand the findings that you collected from participants through the interview, right? And it can be other way around. You can start with quantitative, right? And then maybe you find out whether there's a different significant relationship between variables. Quantitative will say that there's a significant relationship, but in order to find out why there's a relationship between the variable, you have to go back and maybe talk to participants and find out what is going on. So you are using the qualitative information to enrich your quantitative findings, right? So the essence of using mixed method is sometimes to just enrich your findings. The second one is to increase the depth and the breadth. The depth means that there's a complex study that you are doing, or complex phenomenon that you are studying, and you want to get into the depth of the study. So this is where you interview few participants, find time with them, spend time with them, collect more information from them, find out the context, right, or their background, find out the factors that influence maybe their behavior, for you to be able to better understand the problem, right? So you get into the depth of the problem. The second one is the breadth. You want to generalize the findings. So you want to sample a good number of participants and measure specific variable, so that at the end of the day, you'll be able to generalize your findings to the population. So you want to increase the depth and also increase the breadth, then you have to do mixed method study or use the mixed method design. Sometimes you want to test a theory. Maybe you use a qualitative study, you did a qualitative study, and then you develop a theory based on the quality. Maybe you use a granite theory approach, and then you develop a theory. And then you want to find out whether this theory can be used to generalize to maybe different contexts or generalize to the population that you want to focus on. Then what you have to use is that you're going to do maybe a survey and then find out what is going on, and then use that findings to test the theory that you develop using a qualitative study, right? And the next one is seeking for participant input. Won't it be very nice for you to collect information from participants through a quantitative study, and then based on the findings, you go back to the participant and say, okay, this is what I found, and what do you think about the findings? So it's a way of seeking their input concerning what you found. So you start with quantitative study, you develop, you get your findings, you go back to participants and ask them what do they think about your findings by interviewing them. That's a qualitative. So you are combining two approaches for you to seek their input to find out what they think about the findings. The last one is to increase the trustworthiness. Research is all about doing and making sure that at the end of the day, people will trust the information that you have come up with, right? Sometimes people have doubt concerning their qualitative findings because they think it's subjective, right? And your background influences the kind of question you're going to ask. You ask participants. So because there's a subjectivity, you want to collect quantitative data to increase the credibility of your findings. And you can use mixed method to do that. So I can see that there are questions coming in. So I can give Dr. Glazik the chance to ask the questions, and I'll be happy to address them.
Yes, and it's actually a very good point at which to ask this question, which is, in a mixed methods approach, do you have to interview the same amount of participants that you distribute the survey to? It seems impractical.
Yes, it seems impractical, and that's why you always have to take into consideration this part, the difference between qualitative and quantitative. Qualitative, we don't need a lot of participants. So this means that when you survey them, you survey about 100 participants or 200 participants. For the quantitative part, you can maybe select about 20 participants or 10 participants to interview, right? So you don't have to focus on all the participants for the number of when you are collecting data. You always have to think about your actions should be consistent with the assumptions for each of the approaches. Am I making sense?
I think so. We'll see if Candice responds.
Okay,
There's another question in the meantime, which is, what should be the qualifications of the participants in order to share the findings with them?
Qualifications. I think that what you have to think about is that if they qualify, whenever you want to select your participant, there's a selecting criteria or the screening. So this means that if you you have I'm trying to think about the best way to use. You have a screening ways. Okay, maybe the person should be 18. The person should be should have a higher in education, or the person should fulfill or have to meet certain requirements for them to be part of your study. Right? After they have been qualified to be part of your study, you can go to any of the participants to show your findings to them for them to see what they think. You don't have to show it to all of them. Let's say they are about 200. You don't have to show all the findings to all of them. You can select a few of them and say, okay, this is what I found. What do you think about the result? And then they can give you, okay, I think, this doesn't reflect what I said or what the general view of what I said. And then you collect that information and see how you can use it to enrich the finding that you have. Any other question?
Yes, there's a follow-up question, but I think you've actually addressed it about going back and sharing the findings with them.
Oh, okay.
And then there's another question. In the qualitative component of the study, should these selected participants be randomly selected?
Oh, it depends. So I always say it depends because if you do a random sampling, if you do you randomly select participants to be part of your qualitative. This means that you are not being biased in selecting participants. So I think it's a good thing because it's always good for you to not have that kind of control or decision concerning who can be part of your study. So having about 200 participants for the quantitative and then randomly select 10 participants to be part of the qualitative will be okay. But the problem is, would they be ready to be part of your study, right? So let's say if you you select 10 of them and you inform them, oh, you have been randomly selected to be part of the interview. And maybe 5 of them say that, oh, I'm busy. I don't want to go be part of the qualitative part. What are you going to do? So you always have to think about, when it comes to qualitative study, randomization is not all that important. The important is whether the information that you are taking from participants best represent their thoughts, right? What they have experienced. So you don't have to do, it's not a requirement for you to do a random sampling for the qualitative part, but it's going to be good. It's also ensure that you don't have influence about who can become part of your study for the qualitative part. But there's a limitation, right? Some of them might say that they don't want to be part. Another option is to just inform all of the 20 participants or 200 participants that you want to sample some of them to be part of the qualitative. So if they are available, they should contact you. So a few of them will contact you, and then you can interview them, and your information will be credible. So you don't have to do a random sampling for the qualitative part. Okay, so let me move ahead and talk about things that you have to think about when you are doing a mixed method study. As I said, I'm focusing on a planning process, right? You don't have to do mixed method because everybody is doing mixed method. You have to think through and see whether it's very important for you to do. So there are two things that you have to think about: the importance of using mixed method study and also the feasibility of using it, right? The importance in terms of the topic. Depending on the nature of the topic, do you think that you should collect qualitative data and quantitative data in order for you to understand the research problem? Maybe yes. Let's say the topic is so complex that you cannot start with quantitative because you don't know the variables that are involved. So you want to start with qualitative and see what is going on. And then you analyze and develop themes, and then you identify some variables, and then you can go ahead and maybe develop an instrument and measure the variables, right? So it all depends on the topic. It all depends on the nature of the problem. So you don't have to do mixed method because it's good to do mixed method. You always have to think about the topic. Next one is the contribution to the field. Do you think that doing mixed method, you'll be able to contribute to the field that you are in? Let's say the topic that you are focusing on, there has been qualitative study concerning that and quantitative study, but most of the studies, they don't combine the methods. So you are doing your study in order to combine the two methodologies and see what is really going on. So it's a great contribution, right? So always kind of think about what kind of contribution you're going to make if you do mixed method study. The next one is your audience. This is a fact. There are some fields that they don't really trust qualitative findings, right? They always want a quantitative study, right? Because of that, if you intend to do a qualitative study in this kind of environment where most of the research communities will not be able to accept your findings because you are doing a qualitative study, it makes sense to add a quantitative portion just to increase the credibility of your findings, right? So in order to increase the credibility of your findings, it makes sense for you to do a mixed method study so that people who are, if you are focusing on your audience who are biased towards quantitative, you'll be able to say that, okay, I did qualitative study, but I also collected quantitative information for me to show that my findings are credible, right? So you always have to think about your audience before you also consider doing a mixed method study. The next one is the feasibility of the study. Think about the time that you have and think about the resources that you have. Will you be able to do a mixed method study, right? So you always have to think about the time. If you don't have enough time, don't worry about mixed method. You can use qualitative study if you think it's the best way, or you can use quantitative study, right, approach. Or think about the resources that you're going to have, right? Do you have enough resources to, especially those who are going to start with qualitative? You collect data, analyze it, and then you have to go back and collect quantitative data. It takes a time, it takes a lot of resources. So always think about all these things before you decide whether you want to do a mixed method study. And also availability of participants. If you don't have enough participants for you to do that, if it's so burdensome to participants, you have to think about using one approach. So you always have to think about all these things before you decide which approach is the best. So I think there's a question coming in.
Yeah, it just came in. Great timing. So the question is, can you expand a bit on duration? Are you referring to the time we have to submit our dissertation?
Is the time that you have to like to do your dissertation, right? The time that you have. So let's say you have a year to do your dissertation, right? And then after your proposal, after your dissertation has been approved, or proposal has been approved, and also IRB has approved your study, you have about 6 months to collect your data and analyze and present your findings, right? So looking at the time that you have, will you be able to conduct mixed method? Do you be able to give out survey, analyze the survey, and then go and interview participants? Do you have time and resources? If you don't have that, don't worry yourself. Focus on one approach. So it's all about the time and the resources that you have in order to pull this off. So don't force yourself to use this approach if you think you might not be able to complete on time. Okay, so let me move to the design. Design is very important. After you have thought about the purpose of your study and also your research question, you think about your research design, right? Research design is also called research plan. It's a logical description of how data will be collected and analyzed to address your research question that you have, right? So in mixed method, because you are doing a mixed method study, there are 4 basic areas that it's going to be, the design is going to be affected. The approaches that you're going to use, right? You're going to think about qualitative approach and quantitative approach. The data collection strategy that you're going to use, whether you're going to use a survey, interviews, focus groups, observations. You also have to think about the sampling strategy, sampling technique, whether you're going to use purposive sampling, convenience sampling, non-probability sampling, and other kind of sampling strategies that you're going to use for the qualitative part and the quantitative part. And lastly, you also have to think about how you're going to analyze the 2 kinds of data. So these are the things that you have to think about whenever you want to do a mixed method study. So let's talk about the designs. So I know there's a lot of things going on here, but I just want you to think about the wording, right? How the names there, the names will give you an idea about what the design is all about. So there are 2 main designs. We have sequential designs and also we have concurrent design. Sequential means that you start with one approach or one method, and then after you finish that one approach, after you analyze your data, your findings will inform the second approach. So you wait and collect your first data using your first approach, and then you analyze it, and then based on your findings, you decide on the second approach that you have to use to collect your data, and then at the end, during the interpretation stage, you bring all the findings together. That's why it's called sequential. Sequential means that you start with one approach, and then based on the findings of the first approach, it informs the second approach, sequential. Concurrent means that you are collecting both qualitative and quantitative data at the same time, right? You go there, you have your participants, you have maybe 200 participants, you survey them, and then you select maybe 10 of them and interview them at the same time, and then you bring all your data and then analyze them. So we have 2 main kinds of, 2 main types. Is that simple? If it's simple, type yes. If it's not, type no. I'll be able to explain. Am I making things simple for you? Okay. So I think, yes, so great. So let's go to the next slide. So let's start with sequential explanatory design. Sequential explanatory. Look at the name, explanatory. You are using one methodology or method to explain the findings of the other one, right? So in this case, sequential explanatory, you are using qualitative findings to explain the quantitative findings, right? And also it's sequential because quantitative method is informing the qualitative method. That's why it's sequential, right? So as you can see here, you start with quantitative, you collect your data, and then you analyze the quantitative data, and based on the findings, you go back to participant and you decide on the qualitative approach that you want to use. You go back to participants and collect data, and then analyze it, and then bring them together during the interpretation stage. That's why it's called explanation. You are using the qualitative findings to explain the quantitative findings, right? So this is how you can think about it. The next one is sequential exploratory design. You are exploring, right? You are exploring because you started with qualitative data, you analyze the data, and then based on your findings, maybe you develop, you identify the specific variables, right, based on your findings, and then maybe you develop an instrument, and then you go back to participants and collect information from them. So you can see that you are starting from qualitative and then ending with quantitative. You are exploring because you are using quantitative to explore the variables that has been identified using a qualitative study. Right, so look at the name, sequential exploratory design. You are exploring using the quantitative because qualitative is more of exploratory. You explore and you identify variables, right? And then you want to measure the variable and see whether it can be generalized to the population that you are focusing on. So you went back to qualitative, right? Quantitative. So that's how it's called, sequential exploratory design. And this one is sequential transformative design. Look at the middle one, transformative, because they are using a transformative paradigm. Transformative is more of doing research to improve the standard of living of participants, to improve, to help them. It's like you are playing an advocacy role. You are doing the research to directly help participants, right? Based on maybe what they find themselves in. So it's sequential because you start with one approach and end with another approach. So as you can see, you have two options here. The first one is just like the sequential exploratory design, the one that we have looked at, and the second one is just like a sequential explanatory design. But the reason why it's sequential transformative design because of your advocacy lens. Because you are looking through the problem, you are addressing the problem through a lens called transformative paradigm or transformative perspective. You have an advocacy lens. Let's say you are looking at an issue from a feminist point of view, and you are using mixed method. And it's sequential. Your approach will be called sequential transformative mixed method because of that. So, you might be confused right now, but don't worry about it. When we get a chance, you can email me and I can send you the PowerPoint, and, or I'm recording this presentation so you can go back and, play it back and see what I'm understanding. I don't want to bombard you with a lot of information. So let's move on to concurrent design. So the first one is concurrent triangulation design. Triangulation, look at the name. Triangulation means that you are collecting multiple data to address the problem, the research problem, right? So in this case, it's concurrent because you are collecting qualitative data and quantitative at the same time. And then you bring them all together to see how they are addressing a specific problem that you have identified that you want to address in your study, right? So as you can see here, it's triangulation because you are collecting multiple data, and we'll talk more about that. The next one is concurrent nested design. You are collecting both data at the same time, but it's nested because one of the approaches has played a small role in your study. So as you can see from the first diagram, qualitative is playing a small role in the study. Quantitative is the dominant approach. And qualitative, so this means that you are studying a phenomenon, and then you're going to mostly use quantitative to address the study. But you want to address part of the phenomenon using only qualitative, right? So I'll explain further, but it's nested because one of our approaches is less dominant in your approach. Concurrent transformative design. Transformative because you have an advocacy lens. You are looking through you are studying through the advocacy lens. That's why it's called concurrent transformative design. So it also we have two types. It's quite similar to what we have already discussed, but the difference is that this one you are using an advocacy lens. This means that maybe, as I said, you can use maybe critical theory and then look at the problem that you are studying from the critical theory lens. And then you're going to collect the data at the same time, qualitative data and quantitative data at the same time. So that's why it's called concurrent transformative design. Any question? I know there are a lot of terms here, but just think about how the terms or the words in the terms are, and then that will help you to think about whether it's appropriate for your study. One thing that I've realized is that because you have limited time and resources, I always advise students for their dissertation to use concurrent design. Concurrent design where you go and collect qualitative and quantitative data at the same time, so that you don't want to use sequential because it takes a lot of time, because you have to go and collect data from participants, analyze it, and then go back again and collect the other part of the data. And it takes a lot of time. So if you want to use mixed method, think about concurrent, collecting data, qualitative and quantitative data at the same time. Okay, so when you think about the design, then you have to think about the rationale. Why is it important for you to think about the methodological rationale? This is the thing. When you identify an approach for your study, people are going to ask you, why are you using qualitative study? Why are you using this kind of approach? Why are you using qualitative and quantitative method at the same time? You're always going to be asked that question. And then you have to give a good reason why you are using that approach. So there are 5 main reasons why you can use the design. And each of the reasons are assigned or affiliated to some of the designs. So I'm going to just briefly talk about that. Let's start with triangulation. So triangulation, what happened is that this is the phenomenon that you are studying, a topic that you are studying. But you're going to look at a topic, you're going to study the same topic with different methods, right? So you are using different methods to study the topic. So maybe you are using phenomenology, doing interviews, and maybe you are doing a survey and finding out what is going on with the phenomenon that you are studying. So because you are using different methodologies to study the same thing, is the rationale of the design will be called triangulation, right? So the triangulation rationale is associated with concurrent triangulation design. You see, so whenever you are talking about your design, people are going to ask you, why are you using both approaches or both approaches in your design? And if you are using concurrent triangulation design, then your rationale will be triangulation. As I said, because if you are new to these terms, it's not going to stick right now. But as you review my PowerPoint or what I'm recording, you'll be able to catch that information. So the next one is complementarity. Look at the term complement. So you are using different methodology to address different parts of the phenomenon. So as you can see, there's a whole phenomenon here, and then you can take aspect of the topic, right, and use interview to address aspect of it, and then another aspect you're going to use survey, and maybe another aspect you're going to use observation. So you're going to use other approaches to help you to address some part of the phenomenon. Why are you doing that? Because we have a perception that each of the approach has its strengths and weaknesses, right? one approach cannot address all aspects of the phenomena that you are studying. So what you're doing is that you are using approaches to address some parts of the study so that they complement each other. That's called complementarity, right? So when you are using sequential explanatory design, your rationale can be complementarity. You can use also a complementarity for sequential exploratory design, sequential transformative design, concurrent nested design, and concurrent transformative design. Don't worry about these terms, but I just want you to understand why understand the term complementarity. Any questions? And the next one is development. So this means that you are using the results of one approach to inform the other approach, development, right? You are developing the second approach based on the first approach. And this is more of when you are developing maybe an instrument. So you start with qualitative study, you interview participants, you develop themes and develop concepts. And then based on that, you can design an instrument or a measure to measure those concepts and then sample participants and then see what is going on with the general population. So it's development because your first approach and the findings are informing the second approach, or it's informing the second approach. And you can see here that you can use development as a reason based on the sequential exploratory design or sequential transformative design. The next one is expansion. So let's say you started with, so what you're doing is that you are using different methodologies to address different parts of the study. But the most important thing is that in this case, you are using quantitative approach to expand and see how whether, so let's say you are focusing on a phenomenon, you are studying a particular few participants, you interview them, and then you develop, you have your teams or you arrive at some findings. You just want to find out whether these findings can be generalized to the population. So you sample a couple of, a good number of people from the population and then maybe do a survey and see what is going on. So you are expanding the findings based on what you have gotten from the qualitative study, right? So this is all about expanding. Initiation is people don't really use the initiation, not a lot, because you are looking at the contradiction. So your purpose of your study is to look whether there's going to be any contradiction concerning studying the phenomenon using different methodology. So you are doing interviews and maybe you are doing a survey, and then based on the findings, you are identifying, is there any kind of contradiction based on the findings? And then, because what happens is that when you identify some contradiction, it will help you to think about other new information, new perspective, new things that you have can come out. So when your rationale is initiation, you are just looking into whether based on the findings you can get some contradictions and then talk about that and see how you can think about, you can learn about it. Any question for me? Okay, great. It might mean that you understand what I'm presenting. So, okay, so that now what we have talked about the rationale, we have talked about the design. So what do you have to do about it, right? So back to the purpose of your study. Looking at the purpose of your study, right? How are you going to determine the appropriate mixed method design for your study, right? So there are 4 steps that you can follow. You have to think about the sequence of the data that you're going to collect, the kinds of data that you're going to collect, and also the source of the data. The next one is to think about your research question. You develop a research question based on the purpose of your study. And then you determine the roles of the qualitative and quantitative component of your study. And lastly, you have to decide which mixed method design with their rationale best fits the role of a qualitative and quantitative component. So you just want to find out the consistency here. So let me go through each of them and see whether you really understand. I'm going to give you examples too. That will help you to understand. So looking at this, whenever you have been given, you want to do a mixed method study, look at the purpose of your study and think about the kind of data that you're going to collect. Think about the sequence. Which are you going to collect the data at the same time, or are you going to collect it you collect one part of data and then you collect another part after you have analyzed the first part? Or and then who are you going to sample? Who will be the people that you're going to talk to collect that information from? So you have to think about this. So let me give you an example. I like examples whenever I'm doing this so that you best understand what I'm saying. So look at this example. The purpose of the study is to determine the relationship between mental health stigma and health-seeking behaviors among teens with mental health problems in a low-income neighborhood in Accra, Ghana. In addition, this study will focus on examining how they seek for help to address their mental health problems. So this, is in two parts. The first part talks about the relationship, right? The relationship between these two variables. So what comes into mind is more of a quantitative study, right, for the first part. And the second part is more of a qualitative study. So you have to think about, okay, what to be the methods that you can use. So as you can see from the diagram, you can use correlational approach. So you want to find out whether there's a relationship between the two variables here. And then the second part of the qualitative part, you can use phenomenological approach, where you want to capture the experience of participants, right, using interviews to capture that. So if you want to do a survey, then you think about what kind of data that you want to collect. Look at the concept that you are looking at. So you have to identify an instrument that can help you to measure mental health stigma and also measure health-seeking behaviors, right? And then you'll be able to measure those variables. And then you think about who are you going to sample from, or who will be your participants? Teens with mental health problems. Those are the people that you're going to sample. And then think about the qualitative part. You're going to do interviews, and you want to find out how they seek for help, right? That's the process of seeking help. That's the qualitative part that you're going to focus on. And then who are you going to collect that information from? The teens. So thinking about the sequence, the kind of data that you're going to collect, and the source will help you to think about, to decide the specific mixed method approach that you want to use. Okay, so after having a thought about, the kind of data and the source of the data, you also have to think about your research question, right? So there are two kinds of research questions. We have confirmatory research question and an exploratory research question. The confirmatory research question is affiliated to quantitative study, right? It's more of a close-ended. So as you can see, this research question, is there a relationship between mental health stigma and health-seeking behavior among the teens, right? So it's close-ended, it's confirmatory, because your answer will be yes or no, right, based on the result that you're going to have. And then you develop a qualitative research question, based on the purpose of the study and that we looked at. The research question for the qualitative part is, how does teens with mental health problems seek for help or mental health services, right? So in mixed method study, you have to have a qualitative research question and quantitative research question. And the qualitative research question should be exploratory in nature, and quantitative should be confirmatory in nature. So after thinking about your research question, then you think about, okay, for the qualitative part and the quantitative part, what are the roles are they going to play in terms of addressing or contributing to in addressing the research problem or the phenomenon that you are studying? So the phenomenon that you are studying is mental health stigma and health-seeking behaviors. That's the phenomenon. And you can see that The quantitative part is addressing almost all part of the phenomenon, right? And then the qualitative part is just addressing one part, which is the help-seeking behavior, how they seek help. So you can see here that the quantitative part will be dominant, right? And the qualitative part will take small aspect of the phenomenon to study. Then based on that, you can decide which of the approach best fits your study. So we thought about concurrent design, right? So we have three options here. We have concurrent triangulation design, we have concurrent nested design, we have concurrent transformative design. And then these are the methodological rationale associated to this design. So based on it, can you answer this question for me? So will this design be concurrent triangulation design, or concurrent nested design, concurrent transformative design, or you are not sure about that? You can type in your question, your answer, or you can go to this website and then you can, answer whether you choose a concurrent triangulation or concurrent nested or concurrent transformative design. So no response. Okay, so for me, I would choose the concurrent nested design. The reason being that, oh yes, concurrent nested design. Thanks, Shelley. Concurrent nested design. The reason being that when you go back, it's nested because the quantitative approach is taking the bulk part of the phenomenon. They are studying the mental health stigma and also health-seeking behavior. Qualitative is focusing on only the health-seeking behavior. How do they seek help, right? So qualitative is playing a small part. So, and it's concurrent. So I would choose concurrent nested design as the approach. So as you can see here, the timing will be concurrent because you are collecting qualitative data and quantitative data at the same time. And the purpose will be complementarity because the qualitative data is complementing, it's going to complement the quantitative data. And then the priority is the fact that which one are you giving, which approach will be dominant. So as you can see, the quantitative will be dominant, right? So this is how you make decision concerning the approach that you want to use for your study. And as you can see here, this gives you the features of a mixed method design. So always think about, the theoretical lens. Theoretical lens is more about whether you are using positivism or you're using transformative or constructivism or you're using critical theory or something like that. Any lens that you want to use, you have to think about the lens. But you make it explicit. You talk about your lens if the qualitative is dominant. If qualitative approach is dominant, you have to talk about your lens. The reason being that because your qualitative study, you have close connection to the topic that you are studying and close connection to participants. Your past experience, your biases, your lens will influence or is going to influence the approach that you're going to use or how you're going to interact with participants. So you always have to make it explicit. You have to make it implicit if the quantitative is dominant. So you don't have to talk about your lens if the quantitative is dominant. So you have to talk about the timing, you have to talk about the integration, you have to talk about the purpose or the rationale, and you have to talk about the priority. Which one is dominant? Do they have equal priority or they have unequal priority? So this table, after you've decided concerning the approach, you can think about, the characteristics for each of the approach. So if you choose sequential exploratory design, these are the characteristics, and then you just have to choose. After choosing the design, then you have to look at the characteristics so that you make sure that you are doing things in accordance with the approach that you want to use or design that you want to use. The last one I want to talk about is this software or this tool. If you want to use mixed method design, you can you click on this link, and then this link will guide you how to choose the appropriate design for your study. So this link will ask you a couple of questions, and based on these questions, you'll be able to decide the best approach for your study. So you can, when you have the chance, you can go there to use it. It's free, so it asks you questions about your study, and based on that, you can decide the best approach for your study. Okay, so I've ended my presentation. If you have any question, you can ask me now. If you want to get access to my PowerPoint, you can email me. You can email nk.me@thechicagoschool.edu, and I'll be able to send you the PowerPoint. And I just want to also take the time and talk about tomorrow's presentation by Dr. Glazek. He'll be presenting on how to develop and test hypotheses. So if you get a chance, if you can attend, that would be great, so that you learn how, especially if you want to do a quantitative study. So do you have?
Dr.
Yes.
This is Shirley. I had a question for you. I put it in the chat box. I'm not sure if you're going to be able to get to it, and I can talk to you offline about it. But I wanted to talk about what approach to mixed methods I could use if I'm doing a comparative study between two different populations.
Oh, yeah. So if you are using a comparative, you are doing a comparative study from two different populations, you can either use mixed method or a single methodology. So look at the research problem or the purpose of your study and think about, okay, focusing on only a single methodology, will you be able to collect adequate or good data for you to address your research question that you have? So maybe you can do a survey comparing two groups, and then you identify as an instrument, and then you do a survey, collect all your data, and then compare the results between the two groups. Or you can do interviews and see what is going on concerning the phenomenon, and then based on the findings, you can compare the two groups and see what is going on, the similarities and then also the difference. Or you can do a mixed method study where you collect both data, qualitative and quantitative data. And one good aspect of doing a mixed method study is also if you have less participants for your study. Let's say the participants are not, getting a lot, like maybe getting 20 participants of maybe getting 200 participants will be difficult for you. You might, think about maybe getting about 20 participants. And what you're going to do is just do a survey, see what, maybe one example is maybe if you are measuring their anxiety level. See, you identify, use a survey to measure their anxiety, and then you can interview them and see what you think about how they feel, how they think, things that are contributing to your anxiety and everything. And then you can bring the two results together to make sense of what is happening with that population. This one we call, like, the qualitative part will be descriptive, the quantitative part will be a descriptive study or a descriptive approach, and the quantitative part might be a phenomenological approach using interviews to find out what is going on. So you can combine approaches sometimes, especially when you have less participants, just to make your findings credible. You can do that too.
Okay. Thank you. I am going to be doing a mixed method. I do have a survey already, and I'm going to be doing interviews in a focus group. So it's quite a comprehensive study.
Yeah.
Looking at the concurrent nesting complementary
Okay.
approach. I just wanted to know if that would be something that could work with the comparative study.
Oh, okay. So let me see.
I was using that design.
So let me see that. You said concurrent nested design?
Yes, because my study is largely quantitative. I have a survey that I'm using to assess traditional masculine ideology, and also one that's looking at ethnic pride.
Oh,
so
great.
It's kind of two surveys, and I'm doing two populations, one in Soweto, South Africa, and the other one in the U.S.
Perfect. So this case, you can, and especially when you are looking at it from another aspect of qualitative study. So the qualitative part the reason why maybe it's nested because the qualitative part will take like a small part of your study. The focus group will
it's just going to be, I'm looking at just a sample from the larger survey, and I'm particularly looking at the how these masculine beliefs and ideologies were developed. So to get more information about that. The survey is just assessing what they are.
Oh, great. So this means that the qualitative information you are using it to enrich the quantitative data that you're going to get, right? Or the findings that you're going to get. So it's more of, so the rationale might be complementarity. So because you are using the qualitative findings to complement the dominant findings or the dominant approach that you want to focus on. And then at the same time, you want to also compare the two groups that you're going to have. So,
correct.
Interesting.
Does that sound feasible?
Yes, it sounds feasible. And to confirm, we can have a one-on-one discussion, so we can.
I would love that.
Yeah, one-on-one, so that we can solidify your approach and see. So you always have to also think about the implications concerning the decision that you're going to take. As I said, you have to think about feasibility and also the time that you have and the resources that you have, whether you'll be able to do that, combining the two approaches. So.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So any other question for me? Yes, so if there's no question, I just want to thank you for your time. And as I said, if you have any question, you can email us and we will be happy to meet you and have further discussion concerning your study. Thank you for your time. And thank you, Dr. Glazik, for helping me with the questions.
No problem. Great talk. Thanks.
Thank you. See you tomorrow then. Okay.
Yep.
Bye.